All right, perfect. All right, so we're recording now. Welcome everyone to the Omicron Q&A with Dr. Christopher Hobbs, hosted by Botanicwise. We're so excited to have you here, Christopher. Thank you for coming on and offering to do this presentation. And I'll do a quick introduction for you here. So Christopher Hobbs, Dr. Hobbs is an internationally renowned mycologist, herbalist, and author with over 40 years of experience in herbal medicine. From these many years of experience, Dr. Hobbs has assembled a lifetime's worth of credible scientific data, tried and true clinical studies, and recommendations for using mushrooms for healing. I'm sure we could go a lot more into your introduction, Christopher. So I guess I'll just add that you're the author or co-author of over 20 books, which is amazing. It's pretty cool. And that Christopher has lectured about herbal medicine worldwide, has earned a PhD at UC Berkeley with research and publication in evolutionary biology, biogeography, phylogenetics, plant chemistry, and ethnobotany. Dr. Hobbs, welcome to the program. Is there anything you'd like to add to that introduction?
No use in getting too carried away. Just great to see everybody, and it's great to be on the program tonight with you from all over, and talk about and discuss really what is a lot on our minds these days. It's certainly in the news, isn't it? And oftentimes when I do read the news, I try to be moderate with the news, as maybe you are, not get too carried away with it. But usually the top 2 or 3 stories have to do with Omicron or COVID. So it is on a lot of people's minds, and there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of good information out there, I feel. And I've just spent the last couple of weeks really delving into the science of Omicron especially, and viruses in general. And that's what I'm going to start with today, is just talking more about viruses. Why are viruses here? What are they doing? Are they alive? Are they beneficial, or are they just harmful? And so I think, first of all, we really need to frame what a pandemic is and what viruses are. In the past, there have been incredible pandemics and plagues that have gone through human populations all over the world, really all throughout recorded human history. So this is nothing new. There have been many plagues and pandemics previously to this COVID one that we're experiencing now. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about plagues, but I mainly want to focus after that on the beneficial aspects of viruses and what their place in the natural world is. And if we can understand that, I think we can maybe come out and get a bigger picture and maybe be a little bit more objective and just see things in the light of biology and really natural systems and the web of life. So let's start with, I'm going to talk about past plagues for a minute. It's not the most cheerful topic, is it? Maybe. But throughout, probably the biggest plague and that caused the most deaths of all, as you may know, is the so-called Black Death, which is caused by a bacterium, Yersinia pestis. And this started really a long time ago, even in ancient days. It was probably around, we think that it started in China and then moved over into Europe. Even one of the biggest outbreaks of all was between 1347 and 1351. So that was 4 years throughout Europe and even part of Asia, where 25 million people died. And it lingered on, literally. This particular bacterium, which is so toxic and was transmitted by fleas that infected rats, which were moved around quite a bit. They went to feed on grain as grain and other foods were shipped worldwide through different routes. Then the bacterium rode along with the fleas and the rats and the food. So it really did linger around for centuries, around the Middle Ages, the entire Middle Ages, and that's probably one of the greatest or the largest reasons why during the Middle Ages we didn't make many advances intellectually from universities and also the arts and other aspects of human culture were really went downhill quite a bit during the whole Middle Ages, and it was likely a big portion of that were these constant plagues that were happening. Let me turn over to my notes here, so I don't forget anything. The world's most deadly plague started first recorded the plague of Justinian, which was also the Black Death, killed around 30 to 50 million people, about 500 to 549. So that went on for 8 years, and this was recorded in the historical literature. Then the Black Death, again, 1334 to 1353, killed about up to 200 million people, about half the population in Europe, basically. So this was amazing. And think about a time when we had no antibiotics, no antivirals, no vaccines, and we had no public health really to speak of. So this was a pretty scary time. Then next we think about smallpox, which smallpox also is caused by a virus, and that killed around 25 to 55 million people throughout the world, mainly Europe, again, for many years. And then after that, then we had a third plague, a smaller plague in Europe of the Black Death, which is about in the 1800s, but then finally this died out. And then moving on to influenza and more virus-oriented diseases, we had the 1918 so-called Spanish flu, even though it didn't originate in Spain, which killed about 50 to 100 million people. However, when we talk about the 1918 pandemic, we have to also say that not all of these deaths were caused by the virus itself. Many deaths were caused by cures given to people. Mercury and also other really weird cures were given to people. Bloodletting, all kinds of things happened, and this led to a lot of the deaths just by itself. And then it was during the First World War, and so it was really difficult to track really what was going on with the virus and what was going on with all these other catastrophic things. However, it was a pretty giant viral plague that swept around the world and caused a lot of deaths. Then, of course, there's HIV/AIDS, which has caused so far 27 to 48 million deaths worldwide, and this is still ongoing. And then, of course, there's malaria, which has killed even more millions of people. It's just still ongoing. So humans are susceptible to many different plagues. So let's go on to talk about a little bit more about what viruses are in general. What are they here for? What do they want? So, you might say, what's their orientation? What's their goal? Are they alive? And whether they're alive or not has been a discussion in the scientific community for many, many decades. And we still don't have a really clear answer whether they're alive or not. Some say that they're just rogue genetic material that are basically infecting a lot of people. And also basically viruses occur at every level of life. They infect bacteria, they infect animals, and they infect plants and mushrooms. So viruses are basically everywhere at every level of life. That's one thing to know about viruses. And not all of them are bad or, they're, I don't know, that's a difficult term to use, bad or good, about viruses. But some scientists believe that they evolved from cellular organisms and so are really another domain of life. So there's bacteria, archaea, and eukarya, which are all the animals and plants. And those are the three domains of life. And some scientists feel that viruses really were derived and simplified from an earlier form of life that actually reproduced by themselves. However, as we know, viruses cannot reproduce currently without infecting a cell of an animal or a plant, and then basically taking over the cellular mechanism to produce more proteins and produce more of the viral particles. But the latest research really has been leaning in the side of they are not really a living thing. They're more basically just genetic material that has a function in the tree of life, in all of life. So I want to talk about that then. Sorry, let me go. So what we think viruses are, and it really makes a lot of sense, is that viruses are universal moderating processes that bring health and balance to all living populations and systems. So by that, they are necessary in life. They're here. They've been around for a long, long time. And why are they here? And I think the answer really is to bring about balance in many, many biological systems. So they keep one species from gaining an upper hand. So if we had no regulation, like humans now are obviously getting the upper hand on planet Earth. They're taking over. Basically, we're out of control, as we know. We're polluting the world. I don't think that's much of an argument there. We're polluting the world. We're killing off a lot of other species. We're destroying habitat and so forth. So if we assume that viruses really are, their main function is to keep systems in balance and not to let one species or one group of organisms gain the upper hand and overtake all other life, then we can understand why viruses come to human populations pretty regularly, and especially recently, as viral plagues were not as known as they are now. So viral plagues really have been happening just the last, 50, 100 years or so, especially influenza and coronavirus are really rising now more and more than ever. And maybe it's because we are becoming so out of balance. So again, they are ubiquitous everywhere. They're under the ocean, they're in the water, they're under the ice caps. And again, they're in all human and plant cells. They're composed of RNA and DNA, so genetic material, surrounded by a protein or lipid coat. That's why we can wash our hands and we can destroy the virus, because the soap binds to the lipid coating on the virus and basically tears it apart. So that's why hand washing with soap is so effective for getting rid of the virus. So we could call them cellular squatters, if you will. So let me see here. I'm going on here. So the more we understand viruses, the more we're starting to view them as an essential component of microbial systems too. So we know that we have a beneficial microflora in our body. If you've studied our microflora or our microbiome, you know that we have a microbiome, a huge population of bacteria in our skin, in our gut, and elsewhere in our body. Our whole body is really permeated, not inside the blood system though, but certainly our lungs and our digestive tract and our skin is completely embedded with bacteria of all kinds, of very complex microflora. And we very well know now that we're studying it more and more, it really is more of interest to scientists too, that it is the balance and the makeup of our microflora really does determine the proper functioning of our immune system. So when our microflora is out of balance, and there are many studies that are showing this now, that if you take a probiotic and create more balance in your microflora, so that one species does not gain the upper hand again, and that's where viruses come in. In our microflora in our body, the viruses are there, all in our gut and invading all of these different bacteria in our gut that are beneficial, there are also viruses there that are preventing one bacteria that might be harmful to gain the upper hand and create a balance in our microflora. So they are regulatory, they are beneficial in our body for the most part. A good microflora, a balanced microflora where it's complex and not one gains the upper hand or two gain the upper hand, makes for a better immune function. It also helps us absorb nutrients in our body. So that's very, very important to have certain microorganisms that it's complex. We can digest all kinds of fibers and fats and so forth. And even we know that now that bacteria, the bacterial balance in our body can regulate our mood and our emotions and also our sleep, how we sleep. So they're incredibly important. And you might say that inside all of these bacteria, behind the scenes, there are actual viruses, whole populations of viruses that are helping maintain a beneficial and healthy and complex microflora. So they might actually, in fact, they do increase our fitness. So let me go on a little bit to Omicron and talk about Omicron a bit. There are, this is based on a lot of research that I looked at, both scientific studies and reports coming out of different parts of the world, like New York and so forth. And what we found is now that there are about 150,000 people currently hospitalized in New York area with Omicron, mostly Omicron. Some are actually Delta. In fact, some of the recent deaths and hospitalizations are still due to Delta, not Omicron. And that's one reason why we think that Omicron is milder. And that's one piece of evidence, is that most of the deaths and the hospitalizations are still at this point due more to Delta than they are to Omicron. And so according to the research we have, Omicron is about 1/3 to 1/2 as likely to lead to hospitalization, and even less than that to cause death. So that's obviously good news. So right now, research shows that, preliminary research shows that the likelihood of an older person dying of Omicron is lower than the seasonal flu. About 800,000 plus cases a day in the US, which is 3 times the peak that we had last winter due to Delta and or any other types of COVID. Now, Omicron, here are the main symptoms of Omicron. You probably are familiar with them, but this is more detailed and more, there's a percentage involved in this study. Runny nose is the most common symptom of Omicron. 73% of people reported that have tested and positive for Omicron have reported a runny nose. Headache is also very high. So I would say fatigue, headache, and runny nose are the 3 most common symptoms. Also sneezing, sore throat, that's less likely. Persistent cough is less likely, only 44%. Chills and shivers is less likely. And so fever is actually down the list. With Omicron, fever isn't as common. Fever is only down to 30% of people with Omicron are reporting fever. Brain fog, 25%, muscle pains, 23%, and loss of smell is very low at 20%. Another thing that has been reported recently is Omicron can actually infect the inner ear. So as we know, there's a channel, there's a eustachian tube between the inner ear and the back of our nasal passages. So the virus can actually infect our upper respiratory tract. That's one reason why it's not as infective or as lethal as Delta, is because it is much more likely to infect the upper respiratory tract than it is down in the lungs. So the binding in the lungs is a lot lower than Delta or the previous types of COVID. And that's one reason why it's also much more infective, because the mass of virus is replicating in the upper respiratory tract, in the sinuses and the upper throat. And when we cough or breathe out, there's going to be a lot more virus particles to go out in the air than if it was down in our bronchial area and in our lungs. However, so that makes it a lot more infective, but fortunately, because it isn't very often getting down in the lungs, it's a lot less dangerous. However, inner ear infections are possible, and in which case you start maybe getting some ear pain and aches and pains around your ear. You might think that you might have a beginning ear infection. So let me go on here. It's about 2.5 times more transmissible than Delta. There are a lot of new mutations. I'm looking at a picture in the class that we do in the class series. I'm going to do a whole class on Omicron, how to treat it naturally, and also I'm going to show a lot of pictures and so forth. So we're going to go into a lot more depth. But I did want to say that Omicron has got a lot of new mutations, and especially the mutations are in the area where it binds to the our cells. So that's another reason why it's so much more infective, right? And what about the peak of infections in the U.S. right now? If you look at a chart which I did yesterday, the infections in New York City is actually starting to go down. It's reached the peak and it's starting to go down. In the Western United States or other states, other than the far eastern of the eastern seaboard, we're thinking that it's going to be another week to even up to 5 weeks more before it actually starts curving down again. However, we are expecting it to go down within the next, I would say, few weeks in much of the country, 3 to 5 weeks. Where did it come from? It has 20 new mutations again. There is some evidence that Omicron came from another animal species than the other lineages than Delta and the previous one. There is some information now that it came from mice or rats, which is pretty interesting, and jumped over to humans. So the South African study really shows that compared with the original peak of infections, it has really gone down considerably. And the number of hospitalizations and deaths are very low from Omicron and mostly still from lingering Delta. Let me see if I have anything. I've probably used up my 20 minutes here. So the daily average is, I'm looking at a chart here for New York City, the 7-day average declining. In the last 7 days, it's gone down 27% from what it was at the peak. So that is pretty dramatic. And the hospitalizations and deaths are still increasing, but scientists think that that's mainly, again, to Delta. Spreading the virus, they have been some studies on Omicron, how to avoid spreading the virus. I don't think any credible scientific studies has shown that wearing a KN, and that's what scientists are recommending now, is going from the medical mask, the blue medical mask, to a KN95 mask because it offers a lot more protection. Remember that when you put a KN95 mask on and go out into a store or a crowd, you're cutting down the amount of if you're infected. And remember that you might be asymptomatic if you're infected. So if you're infected, either symptomatically or asymptomatically, you're cutting down the amount of viral particles that you release considerably. Even less than 10% of the viral particles that you're emitting through your breath is going to be again less than 10% of what you would if you didn't have a KN95 mask on. So, and also you're protecting yourself, obviously. And finally, I want to say that there are some studies on how we can get the virus through our eyes. Interestingly, I always kind of wondered that. And in the early days, I wore, even when I went into stores, I put my mask on and I'd wear a pair of glasses because I was wondering if the viral particles would get in my eye. It turns out that yes, they can get in your eyes and they can persist in your mucous membranes for some time. So it is, though scientists still feel that it's a lesser way of transmitting the disease. Still, it is good to know that it can actually be transmitted through an ocular route. Okay, so I think that is about my 20 minutes probably, and that's kind of the basis of what I wanted to say. Of course, I've got lots more, which we will discuss in the class.
All right, thank you so much, Christopher. Really enjoyed the presentation. We're going to shift into some Q&A, and for folks that joined in partway through the presentation, just want to remind everyone that this is being recorded, and we will share the recording within a couple days after our event ends. And also, if you are just joining us, after we're done with the Q&A, we're going to talk a little bit about the in-depth workshop on respiratory health that Christopher Hobbs is leading with Botanicwise in about 10 days or so. So we're really excited about that, and we'd love to share it with you when we're done with the Q&A portion.
Oh, Ryan, can I just say one thing about the class?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I wanted to mention that my focus in teaching the larger class is really to share a lot of clinical experience and a lot of experience treating respiratory tract infections, and also training MDs and NDs on the herbs that have the greatest scientific backing, credibility, the most clinical studies. Also, from my experience as a practitioner, talking with other practitioners about what herbs work, how to formulate, and what are the best and most effective herbs. And also the traditional uses, of course, of herbs. We'll blend that, and also traditional Chinese medicine, and also some diagnostics, how to use the tongue and other signs and symptoms to determine what herbs to use and what formulas to use. So it's all very well organized. I've been teaching this class for years, and so I hope you can join me.
I can lead off with a question right off.
Okay.
Deborah is asking, if you've contracted Omicron, are you still vulnerable to the other variants?
Yes, that's something I didn't cover. That's really interesting, and I actually have, I don't know if I can find it in my PowerPoint here, but it's really interesting that what they found is recently that if you're infected with Omicron, the really good news is that they based on some preliminary research, they think we might have up to a year of really good antibody protection, and also T cells. Don't forget that the T cells, like T helper cells, T killer cells, these are memory cells, and so they can remember antigen from any form of virus or bacteria. They can remember it sometimes for a lifetime. And it turns out that I think T cells are not in as much in the conversation typically. We always talk about antibodies. Do we have antibodies to Delta, or do we have antibodies to coronavirus in general, and how much protection we have? But once you're infected with any of these viruses, any of the variants, your T cells are going to remember those antigens, and then you're going to have long-term immunity. Now, how strong the immunity is, that's another question. And obviously, it won't necessarily stop you from becoming infected again, say in 5 years, but it is still going to be a leg up. It's still going to be a lot more likely that you're going to have mild disease and that you're going to get over the infection a lot quicker if you consider your T cells and that type of long-term immunity. But the study that I was reading shows that if you could have Omicron, an Omicron infection, that you might have really good protection against Delta. You'll have some protection for sure, but some scientists are feeling like the protection is going to be fairly robust, even for up to a year. And I will cite those studies, and I'll cite all the studies that I talk about in the larger class.
Wow, there's a lot of questions coming in. We have the reverse question. If you've had Delta, are you less vulnerable to Omicron?
Yes, but Omicron is evading not only the vaccines. We're thinking that Omicron only has about 30% susceptibility, or we have a 30% protection against Omicron versus, for instance, if you had two earlier vaccines, whether it be Pfizer or whatever you had, that you might get up to 80 or 90% protection. Omicron, you only get 30% protection, according to some studies. So if you have Omicron, you are going to definitely get some benefit for protection against Delta or other variants. However, exactly how much that is, no one really knows at this point.
Have you used Chinese skullcap, Baikal skullcap for COVID, or do you have any information on the popularity of that herb for COVID?
Yes, that's one of the number of herbs that are widely used in China and also are popular with practitioners even in this country or Europe or other places, is the Baikal skullcap, Scutellaria baicalensis. It's very bitter. It's a very bitter, cold herb. And so it's good when you, it isn't just a broad spectrum antiviral, so you're not going to be using it if you just get Omicron or something and you have no fever. I don't really recommend using that herb. What I recommend, so Baikal skullcap is mainly used and has been in China if you have a high fever, if you have a lung infection, or you have a bronchial infection and you're spiking a pretty big fever, and you have a fast pulse, for instance, you have a yellow coating on your tongue showing a lot of pathogenic heat. In other words, the pathogen is really invaded into your lung and in the deeper areas of your body. That's when Baikal skullcap is a very, very effective anti-inflammatory, and to help remove that heat and to help resolve the infection and to prevent an overabundance of leukocytes and other bodies, what the body uses for spiking up or to fight an infection. So sometimes our body, if we have a really serious infection like COVID in the lungs, our body actually overreacts, and some people die just from the overreaction. And so Baikal skullcap can be useful for that, to prevent an overreaction of your immune system.
Laurel has a good question about the weekend workshop that we're going to do in 10 days. She's wondering how much of that workshop will relate specifically to Omicron, or we might cross that out and just say COVID in general. And we have the 4 sessions, and one session will be dedicated to COVID. However, I think all 4 sessions are applicable to treatment of respiratory symptoms related to COVID. Is that correct?
They are. Yes. I mean, there's really a lot of crossover between influenza virus and COVID, how it affects our immune system, how it affects our lung tissue, how it binds, how it reproduces, the symptoms that it produces, like fever and chills and cough and sore throat. We're going to go over specific herbs to treat all the different symptoms that you might have, like cough or sore throat. What are the best herbs? What are the best formulas? How to build a really effective formula. And also, again, as Karis mentioned, we're going to dedicate one of the whole classes to treating Omicron and Delta specifically, what formulas to use, which herbs to use. Is there any research? But I think really there isn't a lot of overlap when it comes to using natural medicine and herbs for treating COVID in general. It's not just specific to Omicron. But if there is any research with herbs that are effective, particularly for Omicron, then I'm going to bring those up and I'm going to detail those.
Can you make a comment on long haulers? Is that an issue with Omicron, or is it too soon to tell? And is there anything people can do who are long hauling from Delta or other variants?
There's no way of knowing right now. So far, we don't think so. We don't think that Omicron isn't really leading to loss of smell. It isn't leading to long-term sequelae, if you will, or sequelae. It's not leading to that. So it's likely that once you're over Omicron, like the common cold, you're going to be over it. Still, that's not, of course, it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but it's unlikely to, I think. And what can you do if you have long-term issues related to Delta infection or the previous COVID infection? There's a lot you can do. There's so many herbs where you can build up your respiratory tract. You can help get rid of mucus. You can, and also, oftentimes it's an immune problem. Central to all of this is our immune system. Remember that our immune system is completely tied and coupled to our hormonal system, our nervous system. It's all really very integrated. But if we have, and what happens when we have a viral infection and maybe a secondary, like an earlier COVID infection and a secondary bacterial infection, that is going to place a huge strain on our immune system. So I think a lot of the long haul symptoms that people feel, like fatigue and so forth, and mind fuzziness and haziness, this often will come from an immune suppression that lasts longer than one would like, that's for sure. And so there are many herbs and treatments that we can use to help support our immune response, including medicinal mushrooms and formulas that in Chinese medicine are called qi tonics, like Astragalus and Atragalus and jujube and so forth. So there are many strategies, and of course probiotics. I'm a big fan of probiotics. I'm going to talk about how to use probiotics to help enhance immunity and strengthen your immune system. So there's a lot of things that we can do for long haul symptoms. And I think it centers around our microflora, number one, and number two, our immune system. Our immune system, when our immune system is down and weakened, this affects every part of our body, our mood, our emotions, our energy levels, and everything really. So we're going to definitely talk about that in more detail in the class.
Someone here is asking about elecampane. Is that a useful respiratory herb? And have you seen anybody have allergic reactions like hives or redness to it?
Well, elecampane is one of my go-to herbs. If I were to have 5 top herbs to help keep my respiratory tract clear and strong, elecampane would be in the mix. It's really a fantastic herb that has immunomodulating effects. It has mucus dissolving effects. It has expectorating effects. And it's just such a fantastic herb. I grow it in my garden and I harvest the big root clumps and make a powder. You can also get a micro powdered elecampane from Mountain Rose that's organic. And that's also what I buy. I make my own, but I do buy Mountain Rose's organic powder. And you can just take like a level teaspoon, mix it in hot water and wait for, freshly boiled water. Wait for about 15-20 minutes till it cools off a bit, and then drink that, including the powder. The powder will soften up so it's not so irritating, but just drink the whole thing down, and that's really the best way to take it. And I mix a little bit of licorice micro powder in there, or maybe orange peel micro powder, something like that, and to make a more delicious drink. And certainly it is one of my favorite herbs.
Do you think there's going to be more variants in the future, and are they possibly going to be worse? Or is the fact that Omicron is
Not quite all. The virus keeps mutating, as we know. It's most scientists, or a lot of scientists, think it's just going to turn into, it's going to go from pandemic to endemic. So it's just going to be like the common cold or the flu. It's going to be circulating. Other coronaviruses are already circulating, and about 35% of the cold viruses, if we catch a common cold, about 35% of them are already coronaviruses that are a lot milder, of course, than what we've seen with this coronavirus. But very definitely we will have other variants, whether they're going to become more lethal or more infective, even more infective than Omicron. I personally don't think so. Most viruses find a balance between lethality and infectivity. And right now, and that's what we've seen, the first version of COVID was not as nearly as infective, a lot less infective, but it was more lethal. It caused a lot more serious illness and deaths. And now we're moving towards a virus that is a lot less lethal, a lot less likely to provide or to produce a serious infection, while at the same time it is a lot more infective, 2.5 times more infectious than previous versions. And what if we think that the virus really is all about creating balance in biological systems, then it's not rational to think that it is suddenly going to become more lethal. And that's, I think, a lot of scientists view as well, that yes, there will be other variants, but likely they are not going to be more lethal. It's likely that they may be even more infective. But of course, so many people are getting Omicron, so many people have gotten the vaccine, so many people have been infected with Delta and other versions of COVID, that the virus is going to be running out of people to infect. And that's what we know for sure, is that once more and more people have immune systems that are geared towards fighting COVID of any form, the less infections that we're going to get. It's just going to run out of people to infect, really. And I think that's what we're going to see.
How about Astragalus? Diane read a research article saying that it was a good preventative.
Yes.
Is that your experience?
Yeah, and Astragalus is one of the primary herbs that is in a formula called Jade Screen. You can look it up online, Jade Screen. And so the Jade Screen is used as a preventative. The main herb in Jade Screen, is Astragalus. So, herbs like Astragalus and ginseng and Atragalus, or another herb called Lutaberia, are really the major part of this formula called Jade Screen. And so yes, Astragalus, the bottom line is Astragalus can be used by itself as a tea to help bolster our immune response, along with herbs like reishi and turkey tail.
And dandelion?
Dandelion is rather cooling. It's used as a detoxifying herb, a cleansing herb. It has a specific focus on increasing bile flow. It does have antiviral properties and anti-cancer properties. It's considered a spring tonic to help purify the blood, to help induce an immune response, to clear out old cellular waste products and so forth, mainly by stimulating the liver to produce more bile. It's a bitter herb, of course, and along with burdock, it's widely used by Western herbalists to help support liver function. And you can go through periods of just drinking quarts of the tea along with burdock. I always add burdock and maybe a little licorice even, and just drink a whole quart of the tea, just as a procedure to cleanse and to help the body have better immunity as well.
So Heather is asking a clarification. you mentioned there's 4 herbs alongside the campaign, Ella campaign. For those people who are not able to take the whole workshop, would you mind sharing the other herbs that they might use in that formula?
Along with Ella campaign.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what I use is I've got a. Do I have it here? Let me show you my reishi here. I'm always going to add reishi because reishi really is probably the best respiratory tract herb of all medicinal mushrooms. I mean, there are some really good medicinal mushrooms out there, like turkey tail is a very good immunomodulator. But reishi over the ages has been used as a respiratory tract herb. And I really think it is just a fantastic herb based on my experience, my clinical experience and personal experience. So I have a powder that I make by grinding it up. You can get the instructions in my book. My new book, which is called Medicinal Mushrooms, The Essential Guide. And so I show you step by step how to make the powder, the extract powder. If you want to save a lot of money and make a very good powder yourself, then just follow those instructions. You can buy organic fruiting bodies from Far West Fungi. So reishi is really one of the #1 herbs that I use for prevention. #2, we mentioned Astragalus is certainly good. I like licorice a lot because licorice is an herb that is a very, very good expectorant and anti-inflammatory for the upper respiratory tract to keep the tract clear of mucus. #1 and #2, it helps the other herbs taste good and be more palatable. So oftentimes in Chinese medicine, Chinese formulation, we add a little licorice to the formula. And again, Mountain Rose you can get a ½ ounce of powdered organic licorice. You can get Ella campaign, you can get Astragalus, and you can get reishi. So that's really the best way to add those herbs together to make a formula, and that's what I do. The only other herb I add is green tea. So I have Astragalus, Ella campaign, reishi, and a touch of licorice, and then I add my green tea to it in the morning, and that's my morning beverage. Typically, I use matcha, so I add a little matcha to my herb formula, which to me, and I haven't gotten sick yet. So, and I'm not completely cloistered. I'm such a social person. I do get out there with friends and family, and so I feel that my morning tonic is really a big part of staying healthy.
Definitely. Laurel is wondering, in the workshop, the weekend workshop, would you be talking about contraindications of some of these herbs? For example, if somebody had SIBO or an autoimmune disease, would you cover that as well as the benefits of the herbs?
Definitely. I will definitely cover that, the safety issues, interactions, contraindications, but the big advantage of attending the class live is that you can ask any question you want, and then we can discuss it further if you have a specific topic in mind.
Vivian is saying you didn't mention digestive issues with Omicron. She personally had digestive issues as well as she knows others who did as well. So same here. I've heard quite a few people presenting with indigestion or symptoms of like diarrhea and nausea. Right.
Yeah, in that case, that's also an immune issue likely, and also a microflora issue. So what I recommend definitely is a good probiotic. I've always got them on hand. I'm always sending them out to patients and sending them out to people. What I use it's called Pro 5 from Claire Labs. You have to keep it in the refrigerator. So I recommend, if you really are having gastrointestinal issues and diarrhea and so forth, I recommend at least 50 to 100 billion microorganisms of mixed strains. And again, the mixed strains that I use are found in Pro 5, but you don't have to use that brand. Just make sure it's refrigerated, it's got mixed strains in it, and it's recent. You can't keep them around for too long. Maybe in the refrigerator, they're good for several months, but beyond that, they're potency does go down. But so that's a really important one. And then I would just say chamomile or ginger tea is another way to really warm up your digestion. So look at your tongue, see if you have a heavy coating on your tongue. If you have a thick coating on your tongue, and if there's any yellow color on your tongue, then I would really consider using, again, the probiotic should help with that. But if you don't have a yellow coating, but you have a thick coating, then I would really recommend ginger and ginseng combination. That's a really good way to get your digestive tract back in order and stop the diarrhea. It's more likely than an immune condition. Whereas if you have a yellow coating, then you have to use teas that are going to clear the heat. And those are generally herbs like anything that contains berberine in it, like berberine sulfate, which is what I use, tablets. You can get those online. Or even like we were talking about, dandelion and artichoke leaf, you can clear heat and regulate your digestive tract with herbs like those, and burdock.
All right, so maybe we'll push the pause button on questions for a second here. And Ryan, do you want to take a minute to share about the weekend workshop for people who can't hang around longer? And then if you still want to ask some questions, we'll come back to the questions after Ryan gives out some information about the workshop.
Well, yeah, absolutely, Karis. I'm really excited about the format of this workshop. It's a little different than some of the other Botanicwise programs. It's still going to be recorded and organized into a table of contents and put into the community. So all the students who sign up for the workshop, even though it is live intensive over the course of a weekend, everything's going to be cataloged and organized for you. And one of the reasons I'm so excited is that during this webinar, I've been putting all the questions into a spreadsheet so that we can actually bring them back into the program and make sure that they're all answered with more detail than we're able to get to in a live free webinar like this one. So we're also going to be doing that in the program. A big reason to host an intensive like this with Christopher Hobbs is that with online courses, one of our goals with Botanicwise is to go beyond just giving people a self-paced videos. We love that the video lessons allow for us to watch something on our own time, pause the video, slow down the video, speed up the video, all the things that you can do with an online course, but also the live interaction as a way to get everything organized and in place. And in this particular project, we're really bringing the Q&A portion in depth so the students will be able to be part of a cohort, and using the community as well as a way to add a question into the feed, into the community. Dr. Hobbs being able to see those questions, go in, answer them, provide links, provide more detailed information. And then even inside the course itself, the search bar that you see in the community can then become an important reference for you. So since some of you might be new to the community, I'll just share my screen and show you what it looks like. When you log into Botanicwise, you have your news feed. Everything that shows up on your feed is going to be based on the programs that you're in. And the programs are all nested here inside the programs button. And that's where you'll be able to log in and access your table of contents. So you can see the curriculum is all set up here. Abby put a link in the chat so you can look at the sales page for the program, which also has each workshop, with an in-depth description and a link to register. When you register, you're going to get an email that is going to give you access to this program. It'll give you the invite link. And then the activity feed, which you can see is just getting started because Abby just got this set up today for us. So as we all come in here, we'll be able to start posting questions and topics for Christopher and each other to discuss. And then, like I mentioned before, the search bar at the top, just putting in a keyword there will help you quickly jump to the topic that you want to see. And I also want to just add that in addition to that, we started adding bookmarks into a video. So let's say there's an hour-long presentation that covers, 30 different topics. To actually have those keywords built right into the video lessons themselves and then in the recorded lesson, so that they'll not only show up in your search here, but you'll be able to scan through a workshop and jump directly to the part that you want to dig into. So we're looking at this as an opportunity to level up the way that Botanicwise is delivering program experience, and also to really go deep and make sure that this topic of respiratory health can be tackled in a really comprehensive way for practitioners and self-care and family herbalists. So yeah, we're excited about it, and we can certainly answer questions about the program itself. I wanted to ask you, Christopher, like, what are you excited about as somebody who's spent so much of your life focusing on plant medicine? Why is respiratory health so exciting to you as a topic to spend an intensive digging into?
Well, first of all, I would say that the respiratory tract does offer really clear feedback about how successful your herbal treatment is going to be. Unlike, say, cardiovascular or many chronic illnesses where we don't really know, like you're taking Hawthorne tonic for your heart, we don't often see clear-cut results and signs that, well, this is really, really helping. Sometimes it's a little subtle. Sometimes we're taking the Hawthorne just because we know there's a lot of research behind it. A lot of herbalists recommend Hawthorne to strengthen our heart and so forth. So, but with respiratory tract conditions, you're really getting feedback right away. Is this working? Is it getting rid of my cough? Do I feel better? Do I have more energy? How long does it take to get over the infection? So over the years, I've just running a clinic and being a clinician, primary healthcare provider in California, I've just had ample opportunity to see that herbs are amazingly effective. And really, there are very few drugs that we need to use as far as aspirin and cough syrup, synthetic cough syrups and other OTC medications. Those really aren't, that can often cause problems, even more problems than they're so-called curing or healing. And also then there's the dye and the sugar and so forth that might be in OTC products. And herbs are just so much more sustainable for the planet and for our bodies, really. And herbs work in fundamentally different ways. They work with the body's process. They help support our body to do the healing. It's not the drug that's going to heal us. It's our body that's healing us. And it's the herbs really that are just giving our body a chance to fully heal, and also to help soothe or reduce inflammation or upregulate certain immune processes. Yes, we can do that with herbs, but again, we can see pretty immediate results oftentimes, and that gives us a lot of confidence that in general herbs really do work. They really are sustainable to our planet and to our body, and that they really are effective, especially when we gain some experience and knowledge about how to combine them, which can make them even more effective, and which herbs have the science behind them for cough, for instance, or fever. How do we gently regulate a fever and not just get rid of it, because fevers are so important in the healing process. So there are some subtleties, but I think that's the advantage of taking classes with someone who has years and years of clinical experience and personal experience. I always enjoy taking classes from some of my peers in Chinese medicine because I know that I'm going to get a lot out of it. So I think that's one of the main things that I'm excited about is that you can really see the results, and also after so many years of teaching it, presenting it even to doctors and NDs, that I've been able to organize it in a way that I think really makes sense, and that really is going to help you figure out which herbs are going to be the most effective for any aspect of respiratory tract problems.
Let's talk about the 3 sessions. And I'm sharing my screen again just to show you session 1, ins and outs of the respiratory tract, I'll go through all three, but then Christopher, I'd love to ask you to tell us a little bit about why you chose these three particular this way of organizing it into these three sections. So ins and out of respiratory tract is the first one, then antiviral and antibacterial herbs. And then on Sunday, addressing COVID and just going deep into the topic of COVID. So can you, and then also real quick, I'll just show this slide before we talk about that. I know Abby dropped this in the chat and there's a link here as well. But we are doing a full, we've never done this, I think, especially for a program like this, but a full $75 off tuition just for folks here on the webinar. We're not even gonna share this link after this time, just because what we're doing here is we're trying out a new format, as I described before. So we wanted to really give all of you folks that are really part of the Botanicwise community, sticking around to the end, that opportunity, if you feel like this program is right for you. So just putting this slide up there for a moment as well. All right, so Christopher, what is the thinking behind these three in-depth sessions?
Well, first of all, I like exploring how our respiratory tract works. What are the components? Also, what can affect it? So, what are all the different factors that can be harmful to the respiratory tract? Like, for instance, we know now that if we're breathing city air, like I was living down in Davis, which is west of Sacramento. I mean, the air quality down there is really, at certain times of the year, is hideous. That's one of the main reasons why I moved away up to the foothills, which I have a lot cleaner air up here. But we know now that breathing the particulate matter in city air or polluted air, which so much of our air unfortunately is, and around the cities, can lead to immune suppression. It can lead to psychological problems and other things that you wouldn't even really think about. So I'm going to talk about really how to maintain a healthy, strong respiratory tract, what can affect it, all the different factors. And then I'm going to go into definitely some of the herbs that are the most important in treating respiratory tract infections. So I'm going to focus on antiviral herbs and antibacterial herbs, which are extremely important. Those are some of the herbs that are going to be prominent in any formulas, is to really retard the growth of the virus or the bacteria. One thing I always like to mention, and that is when people have a viral infection, say of the bronchial area or even of the back of the throat or the nasal passages, when you get a viral infection, this is often not lethal. This is often not going to cause serious illness. But what happens is that the virus comes in very easily. It starts to multiply. It suppresses our immunity and then bacteria come in. I mean, there's bacteria. They're already, strep and staph are already there in our throat. But as soon as the virus comes in and our immune system has to expend so much energy fighting the virus, then the bacteria starts to grow and starts to multiply and creates a secondary bacterial infection. This is what most people die of. This is how most people have a serious infection, a respiratory tract infection. So we have to talk about what are the strongest antibacterials that we can use? What are the strategies that we can use to retard the growth of the bacteria, like berberine-containing herbs and oregano oil, and how to use those in a safe way, and so forth. So that's really those are very important topics. And thirdly, again, another really important topic is how to maintain a strong immune system. What can tear our immune system down? What can really weaken our immune response? All the different factors, how to counteract those, and what herbs and other things can we use to build a strong immune system. And again, I really like talking about the fact that the immune system is intricately connected to the hormonal system, the nervous system, our mood and psychology and everything. So what affects our immune system is going to affect our entire experience in this body of ours. And so maintaining a strong immunity, there has been a lot of thinking about that over the centuries. In traditional medicine, like traditional Chinese medicine, they call them spleen qi tonics. And then there's another type of chronic immune deficiency that falls under the category of yin deficiency, which also includes chronic inflammation. So we're going to talk about these things, how to determine those, how to prevent those, how to counteract those, what herbs and formulas to use to really treat those effectively. And then finally, COVID. We're going to spend a whole class on COVID because it's just so important now to understand it and to have, like when the COVID first came, I really stocked up on my herbs. And again, I've got Eella campaign there. I've got pleurisy root. I've got all these Chinese formulas that I know are being used widely in China to help prevent serious illness and to protect me. If I do get really seriously ill, I feel very confident that I have the means to counteract that and to protect myself against even the most serious infection.
One question I have, Christopher, is who is this for? Because sometimes you think like an intensive class like this is mostly for practitioners, and like, just can you talk a little bit about how who it's best for? Is it okay for beginners? Is it going to have more advanced materials if somebody already has a good grip on some of the basics of herbal medicine?
Yes, well, I always fall in the intermediate area. I like catering to people who are just starting out, maybe. Of course, you can ask questions. I still think you're going to get something out of it, but material is going to be generally at an intermediate level. But I do cross over into more advanced practitioner issues and information. Like if you're interested in going in that direction, then I think you're going to find it useful. I might talk about pathophysiology. I might talk about the chemistry or pharmacology of certain herbs. I'm not going to get into intricate detail. I want this class to be incredibly practical. So at the end of the day, it's going to have a spectrum of traditional medicine, really, because that is so useful. Traditional Western, traditional Chinese medicine and diagnosis. It's going to also combine that with what clinical studies have been done to support a particular herb and its usefulness for boosting the immunity or getting rid of mucus or reducing cough, something like that. I'm going to look at the clinical research, but I'm also going to really just talk about its traditional use for preventing coughs, like coltsfoot, for instance, used for so many centuries for treating coughs. And is there any science to back that up, though? And how do you use it? What's the best dose? What's the best format? Is it tincture? Is it tea? Is it a tea extract? How can you use it easily? So, but at the end of the day, I'm really going for what's the most practical, what really works, what's the most practical, and also how to gain as much knowledge as you can in a way that is readily assimilable. Like I talk about the different herb categories, and I love talking about that, how to look at herbs and their effects on the body. So you have obviously expectorants, which help. So which herbs are in the category of expectorants? What are the most effective expectorants? And it's going to be things like elecampane or yerba santa or grandelia are very effective expectorants. So how do they work? And in that category of expectorants, I'm going to build a formula, say that's going to boost my immunity. It's going to help soothe a sore throat, but also I'm going to put an expectorant in there because there's a lot of mucus, there's a lot of congestion, and I want to help get rid of that congestion. So it's going to be very practical. That's at the end of the day, that's what I want to emphasize. I want it to be, you be able to put it to use right away and to really make more effective formulas and use herbal medicine more effectively and just really see how effective it really is. Herbal medicine can treat any manner of respiratory tract condition. I have no doubt about it.
Yeah, thanks, Christopher. So another question I have is like, it strikes me that respiratory system is such an important part of our connection to the world. And I know that when we worked on the medicinal mushrooms and, just learning from you about your perspective on medicinal mushrooms, you definitely like take a pretty holistic perspective into just the ways that we're connected to the world, the way that we're connected to plants, both the science of it, but also just how amazing it is that we can find these readily accessible, supportive herbs that are available to us. I guess, is there anything that you want to add just about how the respiratory health fits into the whole in your work and the way that you understand health?
Well, sure. Yes, I like talking about that too. So thanks for bringing that up. The respiratory.
You might notice we used a picture of like a river delta in the graphic.
I
Kind of
really
looked like a respiratory system.
the esoteric side of it is important, and looking at Chinese medicine that's why it's so valuable to study some Chinese medicine and take some principles away from it. You don't have to go in depth and take a 4-year course, but there's so many insights about the holistic. It's such a holistic system, and it ties us to our environment and what's happening in our life. So, the respiratory tract in Chinese medicine brings in the oxygen in the air, obviously, and this combines with our food and produces qi. So the energy that we get, so the air that we bring in is really a direct, you might say, ancestor to the amount of energy and vitality that we have to express in our life, what we can get done, how we feel each day. Our lungs and respiratory tract really play a huge role in that. And that's why we talk about Wu Jai breathing. In other words, breathing in, using your diaphragm to breathe rather than your chest muscles. So sure, I'll talk about that and how important it is to get a full breath, to really get a Wu Jai breath where you're breathing in just and being mindful of breathing in with your diaphragm and not your chest muscles, which is going to be much shallower. And I think if you breathe with your diaphragm and try that when we're finished with our talk today, try that. Just sit for like a minute and breathe only consciously breathe with your diaphragm in your belly, and see how you're feeling afterwards. I usually feel uplifted. I feel more relaxed. And so in Chinese medicine also, the lungs and the respiratory tract directly relate to our emotions. And in this case, it's expressing grief. So an expression, just expressing ourselves in general, but also what can harm our lungs if we're experiencing long-term grief. This can harm our lungs, according to Chinese medicine and thinking. But also our lungs are obviously the energy we have in our lungs, our voice, the way our voice sounds. Is it strong? Is it vital? This really has a lot to do with the way our lungs work and how strong they are and how healthy they are. People that have very weak voices that sound old and weak, this has to do with lung qi deficiency. And how can we counteract that? How can we actually protect against that and reverse that? So there are some more esoteric things that we'll talk about when it comes to our respiratory tract, indeed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Christopher Hobbs, for this presentation and also for putting together a program like this. I know I am just personally really excited to learn more about this for myself, and to just, I love how thorough you are and how much research you've put in, and there's a lot of really good comments and praise coming in on the chat as well. So yeah, folks here, anybody here in the medicinal mushrooms course, say hi in the chat. And
a few people have said hello.
Yeah.
I thought if people still wanted to ask a few more questions, we could stop the recording and stop the live Facebook, and just spend a little more time together before, people who are ready to jump off can jump off. But let's officially conclude the webinar, and then we'll hang out. If you've got a few more deeper questions, you didn't get your question answered yet, we'll give you a little bit more time. I know there were some really good
Somehow I
question.
lost my my audio. Your voice went off.
Oh, I can hear you, but you do sound a little
I don't
different.
know if that's
All right, we'll troubleshoot that in just a moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll wrap up the recording. Just want to say thanks everybody so much for coming. The replay of this recording will be shared with you and shared with everybody. And you can actually join the Botanicwise community to make sure that you get access to that. We'll send you an invite, of course, to the community as a way to do that. Let me just show you the community slide that Abby made because it's hilarious. And then we can stop the recording. Okay, here it goes. Little dancing guy. So yeah, we'll send you the link to the recording to sign up for free access to the Botanicwise community. We're really looking forward to seeing you in there, connecting with you, getting to know you better. So when you join, you can complete a profile, and you'll see all of us in the Botanicwise community, and you'll hear about upcoming events like the tea time events that are coming up, other things that are exclusive to members of the community. So, and of course, we hope that we see you in the program as well. Make sure you jump in while you have this $75 promotion toward the tuition, and you'll have access to this comprehensive resource about respiratory health forever in a table of contents and the whole community around it. So thank you.